Getting pregnant and having a baby doesn't make me a woman because women don't own pregnancy, just like they don't own. Now, this doesn't mean that motherhood or womanhood doesn't exist, because it very much does, and it's sacred. And my experience as a birthing person is just as valid as a woman's experience is to motherhood. And my experience as a birthing person takes nothing away from the experience of a woman becoming a mother. And when we ask for language that represents us, we're not asking women to change what they call or refer to themselves as. We're simply asking for language that changes what you call us. Because not only women give birth, trans and non-binary people give birth as well. Families come in all shapes and sizes. Some kids don't have a mom. Some kids have two dads. My kid happens to have one papa. And that's enough for them. So Wilder doesn't have a mom yet.
Danny is very open about his pregnancy and invited questions. Many were curious how Danny was able to give birth to his child.
I gave birth at home with a team of birth workers. I labored for 10 hours. 8 hours of that was in my bathtub, and the last 2 hours was in this pool you see here. Wilder's birth was a spiritual experience for me and has absolutely changed the direction of my life. Trans and non-binary people give birth all over the world every single day, and what I did is nothing new. I simply documented it. It's possible because I was born with a uterus. I was born with a uterus, and the world said, hey, you have a uterus, which means you're a female. And so I grew up living in the world as female for the first 25 years of my life. And then at the age of 25, I realized I am not a woman like society wants me to be just because I have a uterus. In fact, I'm non-binary. I'm not a man or a woman, but I have a uterus and I want to have kids, so I'm going to use the uterus that the universe gave me.
Danny was also keen to address how his child would grow up, as well as if his child would have a gender assigned at birth.
Danny, is your baby a boy or a girl? Because I'm confused here. That's a question that I often get, and I want to know, why is it confusing not knowing the gender of a baby or a child? Why is that information so important to you? Well, here's why. You see, gender roles and stereotypes are so ingrained in this society that people both consciously and unconsciously treat children differently based on their assigned gender. Boys will be boys, and girls should act a certain way, right? I use they, them pronouns for Wilder, and I keep their assigned gender or at birth private because I don't want it to change the way that people interact with and treat my child. Because even if you think that you don't treat children differently based on their gender, the chances are you do unconsciously. It's almost impossible not to do in this society. And using they, them pronouns is just one of the ways that I try to prevent that.
Many were also wondering if his child would be confused when it came to their own gender and if it would impact them.
Don't you think it's going to be confusing for them to know what they are when they have no concept of gender? No. And that's because gender-creative parenting doesn't eliminate the concept of gender. Wilder is being educated on gender and the difference between and gender, and how usually boys have certain parts and how usually girls have certain parts, but not always. In fact, by the age of 3 years old, Wilder will probably have more knowledge around the concept of gender than many adults do. You see, gender-creative parenting isn't about eliminating gender. Gender-creative parenting is about creating environments that don't place gendered stereotypes or expectations upon children. The only way Wilder would have no concept of gender is if I completely close them off to the world around us, which I'm not going to do.
As expected, there is also a lot of criticism towards Danny. He is always willing to explain his perspective on gender.
Regardless of your feelings on transgender and non-binary people, the reality is that male and female aren't the only two. Just like man and woman aren't the only two genders. There are 6. Actually, this is a spectrum. Gender is a social construct. As somebody who doesn't feel like man or woman, my gender is as valid as a man or woman's is. Because I exist, therefore it is valid. I don't need to jump through any hoops for my validity. I don't need to perform. I don't need to do anything special to be considered a human being in my own gender identity other than simply exist. I'm oftentimes met with the argument that biology states male and female, but that's not right.
And if people educated themselves a bit further, they would realize that. They'd also learn that there's a difference between and gender, that male and female and man and woman are two different things. One is a social construct and one is science. That is a spectrum.
Danny also welcomes questions regarding their own treatment and how it could potentially impact him during his pregnancy.
Now, the first question is, did I have to stop testosterone in order to get pregnant? Now, I did stop testosterone for about 2.5 months before I conceived Wilder. Not because I was trying to have a baby, but just because I was sick of giving myself shots and got behind. But testosterone is not a form of birth control, and there still is a possibility of getting pregnant even while you're on testosterone. But once you find out that you are pregnant, you definitely have to stop testosterone for the duration of your pregnancy. Most people go back on testosterone about 12 weeks after birth. But that varies from person to person. I didn't go back on testosterone until Wilder was about 1.5 years old, and that was primarily because I was struggling with postpartum depression and psychosis as well. But now that I'm back on it, I'm super grateful to be. Danny, if you're non-binary and don't identify as a man or a woman, then what does your child call you? But I also want to point out that sometimes non-binary people use binary terms because it's what's the safest or easiest. Personally, my child calls me Papa. And even though it's a binary term, it's what feels the warmest and softest to me. I got to give birth to my baby, but that does not make me a mom or a mother. I'm simply a papa who got to give birth.
Danny further explained why he believes he's made the best decision for his family.
Danny, why would you transition genders only to get pregnant and have a baby? This is one of the most commonly asked questions I receive. But the desire to have children doesn't discriminate based on your gender. When I was living in the world as female, I felt uncomfortable and unhappy. It wasn't until I transitioned genders that I finally became home in my body, and that allowed me to be home for somebody else. Had I not transitioned genders, I don't know if I would have been able to make it this far. And what it's taught me is that I'm no more a woman today than I was before I had my baby. Having a uterus and using that uterus to carry a child doesn't make me a woman. Yes, women birth babies, but so do trans men and non-binary people. We desire creating families just as others do, and our bodies are as capable and worthy. Transitioning genders before having a baby is part of what made this process so beautiful for me.
Danny is continuing to prove people wrong. They look so happy together and their connection is so cute. The comments section in Danny's videos are often filled with questions and support. One person said, "As a trans guy trying to conceive, this is what I needed to hear/see." Another viewer wrote, "I love your relationship you have with them, so precious." We all wish Danny and Wilder all the best for their future together. So do you have any similar experiences? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching Happiest. If you liked this video, then be sure to follow our other social pages. And of course, if you have any of your own videos that you'd like to share with us, be sure to send them in.